love to hear a little bit about your journey uh, into becoming an artist, a musician. Um, how did you get started, etc.
Right. Okay. Well, I always had a love for the drums. Growing up in church, the drums were something that just always intrigued me. And one day, I must have been about 13 or so. I went up to my pastor and asked him if I can play for the church. And he said, yeah. Not having any prior experience, I started, sitting under the main drummer there and just learning. And he taught me a couple things in the meantime. But over time, I just continued to practice. I remember some of the days when I was in high school. I went to Central High School, and the way they have it set up, there's different lunch periods. And if you have seventh period lunch, which is the last period, um, you can go home. But they usually reserve that for sports players because they would need to go to practice. But I got lucky. So every day, while most of my classmates were still in class, I went home and I just practiced for hours, and that's where I really got good. And I ended up playing for the jazz band. Got selected for all city jazz band as well, so that was a blessing. Uh, I would say around 10th or 11th grade, I started playing with some groups outside of school. Started playing with the gospel rapper and another secular rapper, and I was actually the MD for them at the time. Um, with little knowledge or little experience as an MD, I didn't know exactly what I was getting into. But being thrown in the fire is, the best way to learn sometimes. So I ended up putting together the band and just learning from those experiences how to MD, how to work with people, how to work with artists, and what really makes a good band and how we can all come together to make great music. So that was kind of my start. As time went on, um, I began to produce music, sitting in music tech class as the teacher taught um, music theory. I would create compositions because the year prior I had already taken music theory. So a lot of what he was going over was review for me. So I would just sit in class and make music, and I eventually developed a passion for it to where I started working with different artists, helping them create their music, and yeah, to this day I continue to make music.
So you started when you were 13, and then you ended up in like all city jazz. You must have played your butt off during that time.
Yeah, I was practicing pretty hard. I remember just coming straight home and just practicing until I was told to stop, honestly. And yeah, that's where I really, got my skills together to be able to play in these different places. And I also think that I was blessed to be around many people that helped me in the journey. When I was young, I would say um, I was about 15 or so. My brother-in-law, he has a arts organization as well, and he used to put on these jam sessions. And at these jam sessions, you had, all the professionals who played for everybody. They would be at those jam sessions. So just getting the opportunity to be around them and see their level of musicianship, it gave me a drive to always be better. Even though I was very young at the time, I wanted to, obtain that skill set. So I worked hard, and God did the rest.
Uh, I'm curious. So, like before you the drumming bug bit you, there was no inkling of did you have an inkling that music was something that you loved or you were just curious about or
Mm, Slightly. Um, like I was always interested in drums. I just loved the look of the drums from a young age. So I actually did start, and I actually took lessons at Gibson School of Music, um, but only for about a month. because at the time I was young and I didn't like to practice. So I ended up kind of putting that to the side. But I was a real sports fan and I loved basketball. So that was the main thing I was doing. I was playing basketball all the time with my brothers. But it wasn't until about eighth or ninth grade where I really developed a love for music and I got back to it. And that's when I really started to work hard at it.
I just have to ask you this as a fellow musician, but particularly since you are a drummer, how did your family a- adapt themselves to having a drummer inside their home, given that it, you know, can be quite loud?
Yeah, it can. I'm not exactly sure how they adapted to it. Um, you know, when I was practicing, they let me practice. Um, but I know I probably did get on their nerves because I did practice a lot. And, especially in the summertime when there's no school, like once it hit 12 o'clock, oh, it's the afternoon, everyone should be up. So let me go practice. And I would practice till maybe 6, 7, 8 o'clock. And I even had the neighbors call the cops on me one time because I was playing too late. So yeah, I think my family though they adjusted to it pretty well. They allowed me to have my space, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've often remarked as an adult. Myself and my two siblings, we all ended up in the arts and humanities, which was a little bit atypical for maybe like a Asian American family, where a lot of my friends who were Asian may have been pushed into, you know, medical field or law or whatever. And the one thing that my parents never said was no, as far as being creative in the arts. Um, and I'm thankful that they didn't shut it down.
Mhm.
I'd love for you to speak about the influence of, uh, let's say, uh, the church, particularly on your music, and as that's such a strong cultural force in a Black community. Um, I just love to hear a little bit about what that's like. Being around that robust music in that kind of setting. Um, yeah, and if you wouldn't mind sharing, like what denomination are you, or you're Baptist, or
Mhm.
um, yeah, what? Tell us about that.
So I would say I'm a spiritual person. I don't like to necessarily put titles on things, but I did grow up Baptist in the Baptist church. And I think growing up in church really helped me musically because even if you look at a lot of musicians today on tour with some of the greatest artists, they came from the church as well. And some of the music that they're playing in church is pretty complex. Um, and just to be exposed to that at a young age, to be practicing that type of stuff very young, it's really helped me. Even when I went to go explore different genres, like when I went to go play for the jazz band in high school, because I was able to play such complex rhythms in the gospel realm, coming over to jazz, once you get the feel and the understanding of the language, it became almost second nature. Um, so I would say, yeah, gospel is really it's really helped me throughout my career, um, and helped me to stay versatile and everything.
Um, Speaking of like being taught and mentors and such, how many years did you study at the Gibson School, and who were your teachers there?
Um, well, when I first picked up the drums, I've only studied there for about a month, and I was young. I was maybe like 9 years old. So I can't really remember who my teacher was, and I didn't spend enough time with him to really remember him. All I knew was I wanted to play. I was young, like all young people, they just want to play the chops and everything. And that's what I wasn't doing. So I eventually put the sticks down and, you know, I went the basketball route until I hit high school. And I don't know exactly what shifted in my mindset, but I chose to go to Central because I wanted to play sports. But as soon as I got there, I just wanted to do music. And that's what I did the whole time. So, yeah, that's that.
Uh, New Era Collective, um, and your role in hatching the collective and what it stands for. And yeah, if you could just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so um, to take a step back a little bit, it's really been like a whole journey and everything. From when I started playing drums um, to going to college, I went to Valley Forge Christian College for my first college, and I wanted to do music in college. I wanted to be a performance major, but because I had started, I would say, a little later than other people, I didn't have the theory knowledge. I couldn't sight read, so I didn't get accepted into most music schools. So I was led to Valley Forge. Um, and while up there, God showed me a few things that He wanted me to do, including starting a business, which is now today Entertainment of the Revolutionary Artists, or ERA. Um, so after Valley Forge, I moved to, I transferred to Tampa, or transferred to Temple, to get some business knowledge in order to start the business. And I did about a year and a half there. And then I moved to Tampa to work on the business with a business partner of mine who I actually went to elementary school with. And we were working on the business. Things didn't quite work out. So I ended up coming back home. And while in Tampa, I learned a lot, in the industry. And I started to see myself differently. I didn't see myself necessarily as a drummer, but as an artist. Um, so I started to take a different approach to things. And once I came back home from the different things I learned, I knew I had to develop content in order to be able to book some gigs, and in order to be able to go on tour, in order to really establish a brand. So I started the band New Era as the production band for Entertainment of the Revolutionary Artists. And since then, we've been able to work with several local artists in the city. We've been given the opportunity to go to different places. We Last year we've been given the opportunity to assist in the production of the We Buy Black convention, and now we're going to play an integral role moving forward with that. And yeah, just continuing to work with artists, helping them to establish themselves not only as artists but as businesses as well, because not every artist knows that they're a business. And so that's something I was blessed to know at a young age. Going to these jam sessions, they would have what's called AU Solutions, which they would bring in people in the industry and teach on the business side of music and let people know that the music industry is maybe 10% talent and 90% business. So um, I was blessed to have that knowledge at a young age. So it's only right for me to pay it forward to the ones that I'm working with and teaching so that we can all grow and have great success. So now today I just continue to work with them, build my relationships, and try to achieve those standards while making impact.
Yeah, that's such a uh, valuable and exciting thing to hear from an artist, and especially um, you know, it's the stereotype that I think artists in general, regardless of the medium that you use, whether it's visual art or music or anything else, that they don't have those type of chops or interest to pay attention to their finances and to the entrepreneurial side of things. And for better or for worse, we live in a society, a capitalist economic system that is built a certain way, and in order to capitalize on your talent and your intellectual property, you need to be aware of those things at the very least, and to really take advantage of your gifts, to have that knowledge and wherewithal. But I think it's really exciting to hear that you've chosen to uh, share it and also collaborate with fellow artists so that people can benefit and sort of move forward together and and grow with each other, um,
Mhm.
rather than trying to figure it out all yourself.
Right. And one thing that we try to do with an ERA is to be able to create a community of people. A lot of times in today's mainstream, they're very selective about who they choose, and there's a certain type of program that they want to move forward with that isn't necessarily right for the independent artist. Or sometimes you see artists that get signed, they may end up changing who they are, they may compromise themselves. But we wanted to create that space where artists are free to create. And the mission of ERA is to establish these outlets for artists to be able to collaborate and produce various forms of art in order to inspire, educate, and empower the people while bridging generational and cultural gaps. So we really just want to give people that opportunity to really be themselves and come together, because I firmly believe that teamwork makes the dream work. Um, I was actually talking with someone yesterday. They said if you want to go somewhere quick, you go alone. But if you want to go farther, you go with a team. So I just really want to build teams of people so that we can go far and create our own. Ownership is really key in today's industry, and especially in today's world where you see that coronavirus has put everything to a stop. We need to be able to own ourselves, own our brands, create our own economy. We got to learn how to live separate from the systems and the constructs of today's society, um, in order to really make a difference and in order to build.
Yeah, that's really also relevant to hear as well. As I was listening to a podcast of a colleague of mine who used to host a show on WURD, and he's now in Pittsburgh. And I don't know if you're familiar with him, Keaton Nichols. He he's now doing a 3 day a week show out of his home, just to fill in a time. But
Right.
he was mentioning building systems in response to the Floyd murder up in Minneapolis, and just as a black man and the African American community, needing to build systems that are not dependent on the dominant system.
Mhm.
Um, so it's interesting that you brought it up, but in the context also of coronavirus too, just how vulnerable we are in our society and being so dependent on the system as it is, and then when things shut down, you end up losing everything or losing
Right.
access.